When the 6 o'clock alarm goes off, Svante has been awake for an hour already. That one can have phantom pains and a lack of sensation in one's lower limbs both at the same time seems a particularly cruel trick of physiology. So he lays in bed, blames it on getting old, while the day begins beyond the curtains. After 67 years on this wonderful, stupid planet, Svante finally draws comfort from the cycle of the seasons, which he'd once thought merely a distraction, a backdrop to perform before. The world spins on, everything changes, the seasons very much included. Was there ever an April so warm as this, he wonders? The one thing that never changes is change itself. That, Svante thinks to himself, and the numbness in my bloody legs. A quarter century since the accident that mangled his spinal cord, Svante no longer wakes up thinking that he can still get out of bed without assistance, but he still sometimes finds it hard to accept. An ironic injury for a man who was in motion almost from the moment he was born. A cruel curse for a dancer. Freedom of movement means many things to many people, but very few of them truly value this, the most fundamental movement of all. Come on then, let's go, Svante says aloud, and his exoskeleton unfolds itself in the far corner of the room, stalks towards the bed through the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight. Busy day ahead, I assume? Fairly busy, the exo confirms, as it sits on the bed and then opens itself in a motion that always makes Svante think of flowers unfurling. He slips in his legs, gets them settled, and the exo slowly rolls itself up his back, connecting itself together around him. It had looked more like a cage than a flower at first. It still looks like a cage to other people sometimes, but it's a part of him now. He can no longer tell where his volition ends and its assistance begins. They'd said it would learn from him, and he thought they were overselling it. Don't promise me the moon on a stick, damn it, just give me something that will let me walk for myself. Years of generic assistive devices had lowered his expectations, to say the least. But this thing? He stands and strikes a pose, a prima donna's point, his arms an arc above his head. He smiles. Well, the Bolshoi aren't going to be asking for an audition anytime soon, but it's been a long time since he thought fame would be fun. Shall we do the usual routine this morning, Svante? Asks his exo, as he heads for the bathroom to begin the day. That afternoon, Svante finds Sonia at home, though not in the front room that serves as the studio of her physiotherapy practice. Instead, he finds her sat in her kitchen, surrounded by half-made party foods, flicking through old photos. Svante, will you ever learn to knock, she says, standing up to hug him. No client should see their physio bawling her eyes out at 2 p.m. in a filthy kitchen. It was you that told me I never needed to knock, my dear. Besides, your secretary software told me you were expecting me. Smart ass, sniffs Sonia. The original and the best, Svante agrees. Sonia tells the kitchen to make Svante's usual, Earl Grey, decaf, a spot of oat milk, and sits down with a sigh. I thought I'd come to terms with him going. She pinch zooms a picture of Alaric in the hollow frame on the kitchen table. Now I have less than 24 hours before he crosses that bridge, and it's like my heart has already left on an earlier train. Svante collects his tea from the drink maker, sits, remains silent. But you have to let them go, don't you? She continues, somewhere between a question and a statement of fact. She looks up from the hollow, tries a smile. Whatever is not yours, let go of it, Svante intones solemnly. Remind me not to share the Buddha's wisdom with you, Svante, if you're just going to throw it back at me when I'm at my lowest. It helped me a lot, Svante says, that line you taught me. But I know it's not easy. I have no kids of my own, but my students sometimes come to fill a similar space in my heart. Oh, I know you'll miss him. Alaric will miss you too, more than he will me, no doubt. Nonsense, says Svante. He may not be very demonstrative, but he loves you a lot. He said as much to me many times over. I know. He's a good boy, really. He's a good man, Sonia. A young one, certainly, but a man nonetheless. I know. Sonia sniffs, dabs at her eyes with a tissue. Not so grown up that he can arrange his own farewell party, though. To be fair, says Svante, he did once throw a party without your help. Don't remind me, Sonia laughs. It took 4 layers of paint to cover the stains on that wall. Can I help with anything? Svante asks. No. You're already on the hook as chaperone. I can't ask more of you. Besides, I'm halfway done. I just need to get on with it. Svante has noticed that people often use a different voice with their software agents, just as they use different voices with people they know well. Svante speaks to his exo in imitation of an instructor who once tried to teach him modern jazz footwork almost a lifetime ago, chiding, yet encouraging, as one might speak to a promising student. Sonia, meanwhile, speaks to her soft sec like Svante's father used to address the family dog, with affection, but also the expectation of utmost obedience. No physio drop-ins until midday tomorrow, she says firmly. The faint sound of a temple bell acknowledges her command. Update the shop's website too. Deliveries will have to wait until I can box them up, but regulars can collect as usual. Sonia's market garden, among many others, is found down at the colony lot at the edge of the village. At this time of year, as spring uncoils itself with amazing speed, she spends as much time there as she does in her physiotherapy studio, if not more. And personal calls, Sonia, her soft sec asks. Only from the close list. Well, that's me told off, laments Svante. Oh, come on, you're the only client who's also on the close list, and well, you know it. Now you get out of here, go teach your class. It'll take you half an hour to get to the village hall, even if you put that exo of yours into overdrive. I'll see you at 7 when the party starts. At around 9 that evening, Svante is sat in Sonia's garden. Inside, Alaric's leaving party is in full swing. Sonia's staying with a friend in Istar overnight. She's left the house controls with Svante as a gesture of trust to Alaric and his friends. She could ask the house for a report for live footage from the various cams and mics, get it streamed to wherever she was, but that's not Sonia's way. She doesn't always enjoy trusting, Svante knows, but she still trusts more often than most. Perhaps, he reflects, that's why people trust her. He'd been planning to ask for a second referral when, months after his injury, he'd been assigned a freshly minted physiotherapist, the ink on her diploma still wet. But after that first hour, he knew she'd do a great job. You going to sit out here all night, Svante? Alaric lowers himself gracefully onto the bench beside him. I know hyperpop isn't your thing, but didn't you once tell me that... Yes, anything with a rhythm can be danced to, and my toes are tapping away out here, I assure you, despite my exo thinking that it's some sort of geriatric twitch that needs shutting down. Svante pauses, sniffs the air. Have you been smoking, Alaric? Yeah, a bit. You don't need to tell Mum, though. I think your mother has larger concerns right now, dear boy. The young man sighs, an echo of his mother earlier in the day. Yeah, I know. She shouldn't be scared, though. I'll be fine. There are many things we shouldn't be, Svante replies, which we nonetheless are. A little fear has its merits, evolutionarily speaking. I should perhaps have been a little more afraid when I was 30 metres off the ground on that Malmo building site, eh? I can't imagine you were ever afraid of anything, says Alaric. Svante laughs long and loud. Oh, if only you knew. The stage fright used to make me vomit while I was waiting in the wings. They called me sick bag Svante at dance school. But you got over it, right? I don't know that one ever really gets over it. One just learns to use it as a sort of fuel. That's how it has seemed to me, at any rate. Alaric nods, leans back, looks into the sky. The first stars are coming out. I'm a bit scared myself, Svante, he says quietly. I'd be more worried if you weren't, Svante replies. Now, go back in and dance with your friends. You'll not be seeing them for a while. Yeah, good call. The young man stands, then leans down to hug the older man. Thanks, Svante. Svante watches Alaric walk back into the house and thinks back to their conversations over the last few years, during and after their classes together. Having previously paid very little attention to dance, or in the words of his mother, to any motion other than that between the refrigerator and the gaming chair, Alaric had quickly developed the skills of what might yet become a truly generational talent. Scholarships had been offered, touring positions proposed, but the boy, the man, Svante reminds himself, was as uncertain in his mind as he was certain in his movements. He was not alone in that either. A lot of people around his age who had never known a world any different had grown vocal, though, thankfully, not violent, in their dissatisfaction with what other countries, some in envy, some in contempt, called techno-socialist Sweden. Citizen salaries, universal basic services, a planned economy that the old Soviets would have envied, coupled with a social and political fluidity that would have horrified them, and all of it hard fought for. The possibilities of technology at scale, liberated from the imperatives of accumulation, lashed instead to a new notion of what the state could be. Amazing how the revolutionary language of the late 20s lay dormant in the memories, easily awakened. But to Alaric's generation, it was just the way things were, no matter how much their history lessons tried to tell them what had changed. Would you rather go back to when it was all owned and operated by ketamine-addled Californians? Svante had once asked him, not entirely seriously. Of course not. That's not the problem. So, what is? It's just... Alaric searched for the right words. It's just that some things are too easy, I think. There's nothing to stop you managing your calendar using a pencil and paper, you know. I don't mean that stuff. I mean, like your exoskeleton, right? You can just ask it to download the steps to anything you want to learn. It'll just run you through them over and over again until you've learned them. Need I remind you that without my exo, I couldn't even get myself out of bed to take a piss, dear boy, let alone dance? I know, and it's great that it's there for you, but it's also there for people who don't need it like you do. Remember when we went to see that dance school up in Stockholm and they had those little girls dancing in exos? It's like it's becoming a shortcut. I feel like we're losing something through taking it, as if we're just going through the motions. Alaric had laughed. Yes, exactly. And I wonder, we wonder, what if that's true not just in dance or the arts, but in everything we do? Svante had been unable to give a response that satisfied either of them. He's still unable now. The next morning, Svante returns to Sonia's place. He arrives before her, so he sits on the front step to wait, confident that the exo will let him stand up with ease when he needs to. That was getting tricky even before the accident, he recalls with a smile. Soon Sonia appears, angling her old cargo bike into the driveway. Our bold adventurer has set forth as planned, then, he asks, as she fits the lock. Yeah, he must be halfway to Malmö by now. He'll be in Hamburg by lunchtime. I hardly even got a word in. There were so many of his friends at the bus stop to see him off. He'll be fine, Sonia. I know, she says, and sits behind Svante on the step. But will he come back? I don't know. But he's more likely to come back now you've let him go. You think so? I do, Svante says. My parents did everything they could to stop me heading south back in the noughties. Listed every objection and risk, warned and threatened and cajoled. Of course I went anyway, and for a long time all I could remember of home was people warning me not to follow my heart, and how much they'd be hurt if I did. In the end, I stayed away for over a decade. That wasn't the only reason, surely. Oh, certainly not, dear girl. After growing up in rural Skåne in the 90s, for a queer boy who loved to dance, getting to Europe was like a jailbreak in more ways than one. You old rogue. Oh, Berlin in 2002, Sonia, can you imagine? The contemporary stuff, the big ballets, yes, all the underground stuff too. Tresor, the Love Parade. So many memories. No money, of course, and no one would hire me to teach dance back then, which is why I started on the building sites. Oh, Svante, what if he ends up digging ditches in Spain to keep himself fed? He'll be lucky to find work like that, Svante snorts. It's all done by machines, just like it is here. And if he does, well, he'll learn something of what he thinks is lacking, no? And besides, aren't you always talking about the merits of physical labour, my dear? That's not the same thing, Svante, and you know it. My garden is my business too. Is it so different, though? You were just a physio for more than a decade before you realised that you needed that in your life. Yeah, I guess. I need it right now, too. So take it. I'll clean up the aftermath of the party. Go pull weeds. Go sit in the sun when you're done pulling weeds. The world can wait. The world can wait, Svante, she whispers. But can I? You can, dear girl, and you will. Now go. And so Sonia goes to her market garden. And Svante lets himself into the house, which smells of beer and teenagers and very slightly of cigarettes. And he opens all the windows to let in the spring air. He instructs his exo to shape his movements into something between modern jazz and millennial acid techno, and soon he is dancing through the house, collecting glasses and empty plates and abandoned jackets, and remembering some blue eyes, bold yet bashful, that he first saw long ago, looking back at him across the dance floor of a Berlin basement squad. Thank you. Coming in with the left hand, see.
And apart from being able to drink water with his left hand, Paul is also a writer, a researcher, a critical features consultant, who work is concerned with how the stories we tell about times to come can shape the lives we end up living. Paul, you're an author, you're a critic of science fiction, you're essentially, your work is to write. And a lot of us has experienced our first experience of using AI tools, although the field is old, as Pontus said, ChatGPT was sort of how a lot of us sort of first came into contact with the superpowers of AI, so to speak. As a writer, how do you feel and think about the future of your work connected to those technologies?
Honestly?
Yes, you can be honest. You're among friends.
Yeah, I'm allowed to swear. It's very early in the
You
day.
are allowed to swear.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, I am a writer, and I think a lot of, hashtag not all artists, but a lot of artists take the position that a lot of, the generative systems that we've encountered, I mean, they do a thing, and it's kind of interesting, and you can make arguments on, how is that different to, generative music, such as we were discussing last night, right? Brian Eno was making generative ambient music in the 70s, and those are amazing albums. I love Brian Eno's early stuff. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with the idea of generating stuff for us to enjoy, but nonetheless, there is more than one thing deeply distasteful to me about the generative systems. Partly it's about the quality of what is produced, and at this point, I end up sounding possibly a bit vain. I know that no matter how good they get, no generative language model will ever be able to do what I do. Yeah, that's not me necessarily saying that my stuff's amazingly great. It's just that you cannot do that by statistical inference. I truly, truly believe that. What worries me is that a lot of the decision makers in the world don't know the difference. They will not be aware that a model can't do that, but they will be aware that the model is cheaper than I am.
And so if you zoom out a little bit and think about sort of futures of storytelling, how do you see that we all can sort of collaborate with these technologies to become better storytellers, and maybe also know when to call you and not use the computer?
Always call me, but not too early in the morning. I think there's room for collaboration here. I mean, I have for a long time I've used essentially a kind of random generation method for working on stories a lot of the time. So I use tarot cards as story prompts, because each tarot card is just kind of that image and that word on the card bundles up a whole lot of associations in your own mind. And so if you pull one at random when you're stuck in a story, you can be, that kind of throwing in of a new idea sparks new ideas. So, I have no objection to external forces introducing new ideas, no objection to collaborating with randomness or even machines. It's more so in music, I think, with machine collaboration. But I have no objection to that in principle. I think we have to remember that art in the very broadest sense, and I think I would, unusually for me, include things like advertising copywriting and stuff like that. Art is communication, and communication, for me at least, I think by definition has to be between conscious beings. I think we have to recognize the importance. There's no point in a communication that is not between two conscious beings. Even a road sign telling you to slow down is still a communication. It mediates that communication, but it's still a communication between conscious beings. And the idea that, if the extent of the communication at one end is literally just, push button, tell person thing, it's a communication. Someone online put this really well. It's like, why should I spend any time reading this thing that no one spent any time writing?
Interesting.